right now, as you sit there listening to this deep dive, there is this invisible pilot essentially flying your body.
Yeah, flying it completely on autopilot.
Exactly. I mean, it's actively adjusting your heart rate, dilating your pupils, monitoring your blood pressure, digesting whatever you last ate. And the wildest part is you have absolutely zero access to the cockpit.
Right. It's the ultimate illusion of control, you know?
Yeah. Usually when we think about our bodies, we focus on what we can actively command. Like you want to pick up a cup of coffee, your brain sends a signal, your arm moves, you take a sip. It feels very visible and obedient.
But we get so caught up in those conscious actions that we completely ignore the massive anatomical engineering keeping us alive in the background. Once you step into the world of the autonomic nervous system, you are strictly in the passenger seat.
Totally at its mercy.
Exactly. You're completely at the mercy of this involuntary autopilot that runs your internal organs every single second of the day. And in pharmacology, this is widely considered the most complex, intricate network in the human body.
Which is exactly why we are pulling back the curtain today. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to clearly outline the wiring of this invisible system and honestly tackle the really difficult stuff head on.
It gets incredibly intricate.
It does. We are going to explore how nerves actually cross the microscopic void to talk to your organs, how highly specific chemicals trigger these massive bodily changes, and how a whole host of modern drugs and ancient poisons can literally hack this structural outline to shut you down or speed you up.
Right. And to truly understand how this software runs, we first have to outline the physical hardware. Broadly speaking, human nervous system architecture is split into two domains. First, you have the central nervous system, or CNS. Think of this as headquarters.
Right.
That is your brain and your spinal cord, which are securely locked inside bone.
The command center, I mean, everything starts there.
Everything. Then you have the peripheral nervous system. These are all the actual living cables extending outward from headquarters to the rest of your body.
Getting the messages out.
Yeah. Structurally, this network features cranial nerves that emerge directly from the base of the brain and spinal nerves that branch out from between the vertebrae of your spinal cord. And these cables handle two-way traffic.
Like a highway.
Exactly. Sensory nerves carry information to headquarters. Like your body saying, this stove is burning my hand. Motor nerves, on the other hand, carry commands from headquarters saying, pull your hand away immediately.
Right. And for this deep dive, we are focusing entirely on that outward-bound traffic, right? The motor nerves. We're looking at the commands going out to the body. Now, within those motor nerves, there is a massive structural split based on what kind of tissue is actually receiving the command. We have the somatic system and the autonomic system.
The somatic system is your voluntary machinery. It controls your skeletal muscles, so your biceps, your quads, your jaw. If you decide to walk across the room, your somatic system is doing the heavy lifting.
It's the conscious stuff.
Right. The autonomic system, however, controls the involuntary smooth muscles, your heart tissue, glandular secretions, the muscular lining of your intestines. I mean, you don't have to consciously think about digesting a sandwich.
Thank goodness. And the physical difference between how these two systems are wired is honestly staggering. If we think about the somatic system, the voluntary one, it's like taking a direct flight from the brain to the muscle.
It uses a single continuous nerve fiber.
Yeah, just one incredibly long cable connecting headquarters directly to your bicep.
Just one cell body safely inside the central nervous system, and one long axon physically touching the skeletal muscle. It is built for raw, immediate speed.
But the autonomic system, our involuntary autopilot, doesn't work like that at all. It's more like a flight with a layover.
That's a great way to put it.
You can't get to the heart or the lungs on a single continuous cable. You actually have two distinct nerves that have to meet up at a junction out in the periphery of your body. That junction is called a ganglion. You essentially have to switch planes at this layover before you can reach the final destination organ.
And this specific two-neuron structure, so the preganglionic nerve coming before the junction and the postganglionic nerve after it, is a masterpiece of biological engineering. A layover isn't just an inconvenience here, it's a processing center.
It has a purpose.
Exactly. By breaking the circuit into two parts, the body can integrate multiple signals, amplify a message, or even fine-tune it. It allows for infinitely more complex, nuanced regulation of our involuntary organs. Instead of a simple on-off switch like a bicep curl, the autonomic system operates like a highly sensitive control dial.
That concept of a layover is super important because now that we've outlined that junction, we need to talk about the two dramatically different modes this system operates in. The autonomic system is split into the chill mode and the tiger mode.
Right, the terminology here is the parasympathetic system, which governs your relaxed rest and digest state, and the sympathetic system, which triggers your emergency, fight or flight, survival state.
The tiger mode.
Yeah, these two modes exist in a constant tug of war.
And what's wild to me is that both of these systems wire into the exact same organs. Like, your heart literally receives a cable from the parasympathetic side telling it to slow down, and a completely separate cable from the sympathetic side telling it to speed up.
It's just a matter of which one is driving the car at a given second.
Exactly.
So let's outline the physical architecture of the parasympathetic system first, the relaxed state. Anatomically, it's referred to as craniosacral. It draws its cables from the extreme ends of the central nervous system.
The top and the bottom.
Yeah, it relies heavily on just 4 specific cranial nerves emerging from the brain, alongside nerves from the sacral region down at the very bottom of the spine near the tailbone.
Okay, craniosacral, brain and tailbone. And structurally, the incredibly unique thing about this chill mode is where its layover is located. In the parasympathetic system, the ganglion is positioned practically on top of the target organ itself.
Which creates a very specific geometry. The first leg of the flight, the preganglionic nerve coming from the brain, has to be enormously long.
Right.
It travels almost the entire distance through the body, hits that layover right next to the stomach or the heart, and then the second leg, the postganglionic nerve, is microscopically short.
Now contrast that with the sympathetic system, your emergency tiger mode. This is anatomically known as thoracolumbar because it only uses spinal nerves from the middle of your, like the thoracic and lumbar regions.
It completely skips the brain's cranial nerves.
Right, totally skips them, and its layover is placed completely differently. The ganglion for the sympathetic system is located right next to the spinal cord. So it has a very short preganglionic nerve, hits the layover almost immediately outside headquarters, and then has a very long postganglionic nerve traveling the rest of the way to the organ.
It is a total structural inversion of the relaxed state.
Okay, I have to ask a critical question here about evolutionary biology, because nature doesn't just build inverted structures for no reason. Why is the layover placed so differently?
It's a great question.
Is it because the sympathetic system's ganglion is placed close to the spine so it can act like a centralized master alarm system? Like if a tiger jumps out of the bushes, you need to trigger your heart, your lungs, your pupils, all at the exact same split second.
Yes.
Having the junction right at headquarters lets you sound the alarm everywhere instantly, whereas the parasympathetic system's layover is close to the organ because you want precise, localized control, like telling just your stomach to digest a meal without accidentally slowing down your breathing.
That is brilliant. And it aligns perfectly with the physiological reality. The sympathetic chain ganglia running alongside the spine act as a massive, coordinated amplifier.
So it just blasts the signal out.
Exactly. When a survival threat appears, you need broad, instantaneous, whole-body activation. You don't have time to send individual memos to each organ. Right.
The parasympathetic system, conversely, is highly discrete and targeted. You want to be able to salivate without necessarily emptying your bladder.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Very bad. But to truly understand how these two systems dictate such radically different physical responses, we have to transition from the macroscopic hardware into the difficult stuff. We have to look at how these nerves actually communicate across those layovers.
Because the nerves don't physically touch each other at the layover, and they don't physically touch the organ at the end either. There is a microscopic gap called a synapse. So we are moving from the physical wires to the chemical messengers that cross that void.
The neurotransmitters. This is where the real pharmacology begins. At the preganglionic level, so that first leg of the flight for both systems, the neurotransmitter crossing the gap is always exactly the same chemical.
Acetylcholine.
Acetylcholine, exactly.
So whether you are going into rest mode or survival mode, the very first message sent from headquarters is universally written in acetylcholine. But at the postganglionic level, the final destination where the second nerve actually talks to the organ, their chemical languages diverge completely. The parasympathetic system uses acetylcholine again. And because it relies on it at both stops, this entire network is known as the cholinergic system.
So the chill mode is a purely acetylcholine operation from start to finish.
Yeah. The sympathetic system, though, switches its final messenger. At the target organ, it drops acetylcholine and instead releases noradrenaline. Because of this, the survival network is referred to as the adrenergic system.
Okay, and this brings us to the really difficult mechanics of how acetylcholine actually functions on a cellular level, because it is a multi-step factory process inside the nerve ending. And understanding this life cycle is the key to understanding almost all autonomic pharmacology.
It is. The synthesis and release of acetylcholine requires a fiercely precise assembly line. First, the raw material, an amino acid called choline, must be pumped from the fluid outside the nerve into the terminal.
It has to get inside.
Right, and it gets inside through a highly specific molecular doorway called a sodium choline transporter.
So you get the raw material inside the factory.
Once inside, an enzyme merges that choline with an acetyl group to finally synthesize acetylcholine. But it can't just float freely in the cellular fluid. It would degrade. It has to be safely packaged. So a specialized mechanism called a vesicular pump pushes the newly formed acetylcholine into tiny storage bubbles called synaptic vesicles.
Basically, box it up, put it in the warehouse, and wait for the order to ship.
Exactly. When an electrical signal finally arrives from the brain, traveling down the nerve, it changes the voltage of the membrane. This voltage change acts like a green light, snapping open specific channels that allow calcium ions to flood into the nerve ending.
Calcium is the trigger.
Yeah. This isn't just a signal. The physical presence of that calcium forces proteins to physically yank those storage bubbles toward the edge of the nerve. They fuse with the outer membrane and violently expel the acetylcholine across the gap to hit the organ.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because releasing the chemical is only half the battle. Once acetylcholine crosses the gap and tells your heart to slow down, it can't just linger there.
No, it can't.
If it kept stimulating the heart muscle, your heart would eventually stop beating entirely. So the body employs an incredibly aggressive cleanup crew.
An enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. It is one of the fastest-acting enzymes in the human body. Its sole purpose is to obliterate the acetylcholine a fraction of a second after it delivers its message to the organ receptor.
It's like a wildly aggressive bouncer at an exclusive club. Acetyl
drugs work too. The pharmacology we use to treat diseases revolves around manipulating these two modes.
Right.
We have cholinergic drugs, which artificially mimic the relaxed state. We have anticholinergic drugs, which block the relaxed state. And we have adrenergic drugs, which artificially induce or block the emergency tiger state.
So within those categories, particularly the cholinergic drugs that promote the relaxed state, the strategies are brilliant. You have direct-acting drugs. These are molecules synthesized in a lab to be structurally identical to acetylcholine.
You swallow a pill, the chemical enters your bloodstream, and it physically docks into your organ's receptors, directly telling the heart to slow down or the stomach to digest.
Wait, so if direct drugs do the heavy lifting themselves, how do indirect acting drugs work? They don't actually stimulate the organ at all, do they? They basically just tackle the bouncer.
Yes, exactly.
They inhibit the acetylcholinesterase enzyme, so the body's natural acetylcholine can stay in the club and party longer without getting ripped in half.
That is exactly the mechanism.
Yeah.
Indirect acting drugs are acetylcholinesterase inhibitors.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't introducing any new chemical messengers to the body. You are simply paralyzing the cleanup crew.
The bouncer.
Yeah. By stopping the enzyme from ripping the molecules in half, your own natural acetylcholine